To talk about this more, we're joined by aviation analyst, airline pilot and founder of BizJet, Fabrizio Poli. Fabrizio, thank you for talking to us about this. What is the most likely explanation? Both fuel switches were cut off. We know that Boeing has conducted those extensive tests. There is no error, at least it would appear, on the part of the aircraft. So what are we looking at here? Human error, pilot intervention, or something else entirely, do you think?
Well, at this point, I would say there's three options. The first one would be pilot suicide. Now, bearing in mind that, technically speaking, when they were going down the runway, the first officer was flying, okay? So when they got to the decision speed, the first officer's hands would have both been on the yoke. And then as they rotate the airplane, he'll be pulling back on the yoke. And as they get a positive rate of climb, he will call gear up. And then the captain would have put his hand over to bring the landing gear up. Now, we know the landing gear from this footage. You can see the landing gear was down all the time. So the gear wasn't actually brought up. So could the captain have gone over and cut off the two fuel levers to cut off? That's a possibility. And that's why what you hear one pilot say, why did you cut off the fuel? And the other one say, no, I didn't. So did the one that said, no, I didn't, was he saying a lie or was he saying the truth? So we don't know. I mean, I would say it's probably 70% that it was pilot suicide, but then you need to ask yourself the question, well, why would he commit suicide? Apparently the captain, his mother had just passed away and he wanted to retire early and look after his father. So I'm not quite sure there if he was motivated to kill himself and 200 other people with him. So that's one option. The other option would be a malfunction of some sort on the aircraft that made both engines cut off. And the other one would be sabotage or a hack. Now, can this airplane be hacked? It can be hacked. It means that someone that's going to hack it has to be highly skilled. They have to have access to the aircraft on the ground, do what they need to do on the ground, and then be able to action that remotely once the aircraft takes off, or set it up so that it would kick into gear a few seconds once the airplane was in the air. So that's certainly something that the accident investigators should be looking into. I'm quite surprised no one's been talking about sabotage or hack. But if it's a hack or sabotage, the question needs to be, well, why would someone hack or sabotage this aircraft? What's their motive? And the investigators need to do their research.
Fabrizio, the cockpit recordings seem to have raised really more questions than answers in this case. Simply down, I think, to the quality, which we'll talk about more in a second as well. But should we really be relying on that as the answer for what has happened here?
Well, you see, the other thing is that the pilots had enough time to make a mayday call, okay? Now, they'd only been in the air like 30, 40 seconds. And, you know, as pilots, we're always told, aviate, navigate, communicate. So communicate is the last thing. So they're dealing with this sudden double engine failure. They're 600 feet from the ground, and they had time to make a mayday call. So that's interesting, that's thrown into the mix there, which to me means that they were probably both confused as why these engines are suddenly cut off. They put their engines back on again. One engine started to spool up and the other one was just about to. But, you know, with 600 feet above the runway and the airplane was sinking down, there wasn't enough power to stop the rate of descent and get the aircraft back into the air. And that's why it crashed and everybody died. Apart from one person, of course.
As an aviation expert, identifying what the pilots were saying on this black box recording is really incredibly difficult. And modern parameters on these black box recordings, 3,500 parameters have been recorded at any given time. It's evolved quite a lot from what the black box would have been. But the audio is still very much rudimentary in what we're hearing. Surely that should have moved forward somewhat at this stage.
Well, no, let's put it this way. They know who said what. So when they heard one pilot say, why did you cut the engines off? And they know who actually said that. And I think it was the first officer, because his both hands would have been on the flight control, on the yoke. So that's where he would have been. So he wouldn't have moved his hand over, because that's what you do. Unless he did, and then the other pilot said, what you do that for? But then they would have probably used a different language. It's almost like, oh, he sees there's been an engine failure, or he saw the hand, instead of going for the landing gear, went to cut the fuel off. And so he would then say, well, why did you do that? He said, no, I didn't. Okay. And then they crashed.
The transparency that we're getting from investigators during an active probe like this, I'm guessing is very important, because it does raise a bigger question about the aircraft itself. Could this problem happen to other Dreamliners, for instance?
Well, I mean, if this aircraft has been hacked, any modern aircraft potentially could be hacked, which is why cybersecurity is something that already companies are looking into big time. It's becoming a big thing, but also in these flying machines. we need to make sure that these aircraft cannot be hacked. There has to be good cybersecurity systems in place to stop this from happening. Now, I'm not saying that this was hacked. It's a possibility. But, the fact that somebody could hack an airplane, that is something that, could happen down the road, especially with these modern aircraft like this 787 or the latest Airbuses and that. Both Boeing and Airbus could be hacked, and even all the private jets, the modern ones.
I mean, no, negative publicity is the last thing that Boeing or Airbus at this stage need to tarnish their reputation. And something like this kind of puts concern among your everyday consumers who are jumping on to commercial flights. Would there be a need for a concern with something like this and a reoccurrence of a situation like this now that Boeing have said there is no issue with the Dreamliner fleet?
Well, I mean, Boeing's the one that's lost out the most. I mean, with the incident, the two accidents, the 737 MAX, that whole scandal. I mean, we just saw at the Paris Air Show the other week where Airbus had loads, like 10 times more orders than Boeing. So it seems like the airlines are trusting Airbus more than Boeing. But even here in Europe now, I mean, Ryanair is looking to do a deal with a Chinese company for the C919 aircraft to substitute their 737s. Now, this is going to be a big blow to Boeing because, Ryanair operate over 400 737s. So they're a big Boeing customer. If Boeing lose Ryanair as a customer and this Chinese airliner starts to gain traction on the market, we've got a third player now that compete with Airbus and Boeing. So that's going to be interesting.
Before I move on to another question, I just want to read the latest statement from Air India on AI 171 and the accident. Air India says it stands in solidarity with the families and those affected and continues to fully cooperate with the AAIB and other authorities as their investigation progress. Given the active nature of the investigation, they are unable to comment on specific details and refer all such inquiries to AAIB. I want to ask you though, Fabrizio, in the future, AI has been used in pretty much every industry. Could the cockpit in some way use AI versions of the transcript and real-time diagnostics being used by AI as well to prevent not just a mystery like this, but also an incident like this from occurring again?
Well, I think the future of aviation is having one pilot on board and the AI being the co-pilot. I mean, I see how AI can helps me in my business. And it would be great to have an AI cockpit, co-pilot in the cockpit. So I think AI can help with investigations. You can put all the data in and it can look at all the different possibilities, including the hack. I mean, can you hack a 787? If so, how? And then go through that procedure and see how they would have done it. And then if it does require that you have access to the aircraft, let's go back and see who had access to the aircraft a few hours before when it was on the ground, and see who these people are and what they do, and could any of them maybe be motivated to hack the airplane. So AI can help with all these things as well. So I mean, certainly the AIB is certainly, I hope they're working with AI. It will just make things a lot easier and a lot quicker.
Fabrizio Poli, I want to thank you for both your input and your insight into that today. Thank you.